been a while since we talked about contracts here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Let's do that again with the season coming up by talking about rookie deals, options the Pacers have to consider before Halloween, rookie extensions. We didn't get to talk about Obi Toppin last time we talked extensions, and let's talk about filling out the Pacers roster on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Wednesday, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're diving back into some offseason contract stuff, looking at rookie deals under several lenses for the Pacers, as well as the rest of their training camp roster, which is being filled out as we speak, presumably. We'll start with rookie scale stuff. This is stuff that we really haven't covered in depth here on Locked On Pacers this summer, and that's the options they have with Bennedict Mathurin and Isaiah Jackson's contracts that they have to decide on by the end of October. Then we'll talk extensions, rookie scale extensions for two guys on rookie scale deals, Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin, before closing, looking at the state of the Pacers roster and stuff they can still do prior to training camp starting. We have not done any sort of transactional shows or off-season shows, signings, trades, contract stuff, whatever, since the very first day of August or the last day of July, looking at the moves Pacers could make for the rest of the summer show. So excited to dive back into this a little bit because there's some new stuff coming on. There was just a recent podcast on Dunked On that got me into talking about this, and it's time to dive in to rookie scale stuff for the Pacers. We'll start with contract options, as is the case with rookie scale deals. To set the scene a little bit, how this works is if you're drafted in the first round of the NBA draft, the first 2 years of your contract are fully guaranteed right away. And then the third year and the fourth year are team option years, but they're decided on a full year in advance. So after your first season, you'll be about to enter your second season, and the team you're on has to decide on your third year rookie scale player or team option. And after your second season, the team you're on has to decide on the fourth year rookie scale team option, even though you're about to enter your third year. So Jalen Smith historically had his third year option declined by the Suns after just one season. They saw him for 1 year after picking him 10th overall and said nope, which is wild. That very rarely happens on third year options. And then that happens for lots of teams every year. For the Pacers last summer, it was a very active choice. They had lots of guys they had to think about. They had, well, not really think hard, but they had a lot of guys who had this decision for them. Tyrese Halliburton's fourth-year option, Chris Duarte's third-year option, Aaron Nesmith's fourth-year option, Isaiah Jackson's third-year option, all were due up last summer, and all were fairly easy decisions for the Pacers, given the state of those players, given where they were with the franchise, given how things are going on all that. This year, it's much fewer, right? Halliburton no longer in a spot where options are due for him. Obi Toppin doesn't have options due for him. Aaron Nesmith, they're all past the point of options. Jalen Smith can't have them anymore because of what the Suns did. So the only two guys left on the Pacers roster who have rookie scale team options this offseason are Bennedict Mathurin and Isaiah Jackson. It's a third-year option for Mathurin, and it's a fourth-year option for Isaiah Jackson. And then next year, the only ones they will have would be Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, and then again, Bennedict Mathurin's fourth-year option. So they add two next year. They have two this offseason. And Mathurin's, well, I hope I can summarize this very quickly. He has the third-year option for the 2024-25 season, because remember, this is a full year in advance. So Mathurin's money is already guaranteed for 23-24. He has a $7.3 million option for 2024-25. That's very easy. Even if he was a veteran player, he'd be worth that much money. Guys who can score like him and get to the line at his level, which means you're scoring 16 points a game on about league average efficiency. I think his true shooting percentage was like 0.1 or 0.2 over league average last year. Yeah, that's a player you would like for that much money, especially at his age. And that is where this is even easier. He's super young. He's only entering his second season. He's going to get better. He's going to be worth way more than he is right now, and he's worth way more than that right now. Bennedict Mathurin, easy decision. There is nothing to it. The Pacers would like to have him for several more years. Picking up that option is an absolute no-brainer. There's nothing to even say. There's no other side. There's no other decision. There's no better use of a roster spot or the money. Bennedict Mathurin's third-year option will be picked up as easy as picking up Halliburton's fourth-year option last year. For example, Isaiah Jackson's actually merits some discussion. I got to give myself a little faux pas because I wrote already a little bit of a story in Forbes about these options, and I said that they'd both be easy decisions. And I still think that for me, the Isaiah Jackson one is an easy decision. But if you listen to the player season preview episode talking about centers earlier this week with Kalen Cooper, we did talk about Isaiah Jackson's option, what it means for the Pacers. And I did want to kind of think more about, is that really as easy for the Pacers as I kind of laid it out to be? So here's why I think it's an easy decision, because it's cheap, right? Jackson was picked late in the draft, 21st overall, in the last 10 picks, the first round of that draft in 2021. And the later you get in the draft, the lower your cap hits are from year to year, right? So Jackson in this coming season will make $2.6 million, but your fourth year option is much higher than your first 3 seasons on rookie scale deals. So Jackson's option is $4.4 million. That's still really low, right? That's less than Jalen Smith's going to make this coming season, right? That's just not very much money. And so because that number is so low, the opportunity cost of picking up Isaiah Jackson's option is also pretty low, right? You're not limiting yourself in any sort of spending way by having his money on the books. That is typically a scenario where it makes sense to keep a guy you've invested in and believe in, right? Because picking their option up does not do a whole lot to impede any decisions the Pacers could make next summer. I made a similar argument for TJ Leaf, and we'll talk about why that was stupid in a second because something else happened there. But for Jackson, there actually is stuff to consider, right? No player at 4.4 million on a team's cap sheet is like a hindrance to your spending power and additive to your team unless you're right near a financial barrier, right? If you're a team that is really close to the salary cap, you might want more space so you can actually add something significant. If you're really close to an apron or the luxury tax or something where you need to be under that line instead of over it, yes, 4.4 million can be a hindrance. If you're the Pacers and next summer, could be your last summer of having significant cap space, but you have significant space, 4.4 million is not that much of a hindrance. They're going to have a lot of cap space either way. So there's not a lot of financial opportunity cost in declining Jackson's option, right? That's a big deal. Now, here's the thing. I said that for TJ Leaf, but let's talk about the difference there. I said the same thing for TJ Leaf. The opportunity cost of picking up Leaf's fourth year option is very low. The Pacers were over the cap then, so they couldn't even have gotten cap space. They would have had the same resources to add to their team with or without him, right? They picked him in the first round. They clearly had some faith in him. And I was right. They picked up his option. The difference was they picked up his option and then a pandemic happened. And then the cap went down the following season. And so the Pacers actually were way closer to the luxury tax than any projection ever could have predicted, right? If the cap had stayed the same even, they would have been far enough from the tax that it wasn't a big deal. Because the salary cap went down, then TJ Leaf's contract actually became a hindrance. And they had to trade him in a pick for Jalen McHugh to clear some salary. So if there is a catastrophic world-altering event in the next calendar year, yes, Isaiah Jackson's contract could be a hindrance. I'd be willing to bet against that because it's happened once in my entire lifetime via the pandemic. But I suppose I can never be as certain as I was back then. That said, the opportunity cost is pretty low. And I think the Pacers learned a little bit of a lesson from Solomon Hill, although that was the past front office. Kevin Pritchard was still working for the Pacers at the time. For those of you who don't remember, the Pacers drafted Solomon Hill in the first round in 2015, 2014. The specific year is not important. What is important is they declined his fourth year option after his second season, and then he had a really good third year. And by really good, I mean he was a fine NBA player, really good compared to his first 2 seasons, and was a solid contributor in the postseason that year, was 0.1 seconds away from hitting a massive buzzer-beating 3 against Toronto. It was too late, but still. And he played well enough that he got a bunch of money from the New Orleans Pelicans, 50-something million dollars, and that was an overpay. And it had to do with the timing of becoming a free agent in 2017 when the cap spiked. But either way, he was valuable. He became valuable, and the Pacers could have had him for very cheap and then had a nice wing as a restricted free agent, and they didn't because they declined the option. That can happen if a player takes off in your third year after you decline the option. Jalen Smith had his third year option declined, got traded to the Pacers, and then made a bunch of threes and looked immensely more valuable, right? This can happen. Hill's third season, he ended up, his stats don't look phenomenal, but he ended up having a nice career in the NBA for 9 years and made quite a bit of money because he could kind of make threes and kind of play D. I'm over talking about this. The lesson to say is they learned a lot from that. I think you better be really sure if you're declining a guy's fourth year that they just have absolutely no future with your team. And I don't know that they know that with Isaiah Jackson. The future of the center position matters a lot here, right? With so much in flux. Tice has a team option next year. Jalen Smith has a player option next year. In theory, there could be very few backup centers on the Pacers next year. They could also all be back. There's so much in flux. So it's hard to say if they need to commit to anyone now. And like Caitlin and I talked about earlier this week, it's not like it's a huge deal necessarily, but if they commit to Jackson with a fourth-year option, they certainly need to give him opportunities this season, and it does change a little bit of their thinking with how they handle their backup centers, even though they should just be playing either what they consider the best player or the best fitting player. That does have to matter. To me, though, all these things, these little things matter. Like what Caitlin put in my head when talking about the future of the position, and if they pick up the option that his future becomes a little different this season, and that they probably have to give him more chances than if they don't, which isn't a bad thing. Just that would change how they think in terms of backup center minutes. There is a path where they do decline the option to me now. I don't think it's as easy as I originally thought, but I still think they should pick it up. And I think that I would, if I'm the Pacers, I'm definitely picking it up. Very little more thought than I've already given right here, because I don't think he'll be negative value on that contract. At worst, he's neutral value. It's a cheapo deal. He'll only be 22 next summer, right? There shouldn't be much opportunity cost with a billion asterisks because of what I just described with TJ Leaf. So if they pick it up and he stinks, whatever. Maybe you can toss him to a developing team for nothing in return. Maybe you could throw him in a bigger trade. Maybe you just have him be your third or fourth big and never play until his contract is over. That's not like the end of the world. But that, some other team could prefer the extra year too, right? Think about Jalen Smith. It was a big deal for the Pacers that they were limited in what they could offer him after trading for him, right? If the Pacers decline his option, that hurts Jackson's trade value immediately for that exact reason, right? Because it's much harder to trade for him. It's easier to sign him the following year for the Jalen Smith reason. So it'd be pretty wild to me if he was a drastically negative value on a $4.4 million contract as a 22-year-old. And I don't think the Pacers have a ton of opportunity cost. And I think $4.4 million for a young developing player who can maybe play two positions, although it's a low chance at this point, is a good value for a roster spot. I think it's an easy decision to me. Sorry, a mostly easy decision to me, but less easy than I originally thought. But I think both Mathurin and Jackson will have their options picked up. Let me know what you think. I probably just talked in circles and contradicted myself because I had a lot of notes and a lot of conflicting thoughts here. Comment down below on YouTube or tweet at me at Tony R. East or this podcast at Locked On Pacers. Let's talk about rookie extensions, more established players here. Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin, they are extension eligible until 2 days before the season starts. Is anything going to happen? What are the rules there? Let's talk about that. Before we do so, though, I need to talk to you guys about Jase Medical, who are making the Jase case. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind. So you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. You know that you have access to that medication. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand via the Jase case, which again sends right to your door. Simple as easy as 1, 2, 3, and you'll be ready to go. If there's ever an emergency and you can't get medicine for whatever reason, supply chain shortages, natural disasters, travel, pandemics, whatever, Jase Medical has you covered. They have everything from the online evaluation to a licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Promo code, all one word, LOCKEDON. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, I'm going to recommend Locked On NBA because I was on it. Me and John Corrales talking Damian Lillard mystery Eastern Conference team, but really we're just talking about a future where James Harden and Damian Lillard do not get traded. Plus, Malcolm Brogdon, a former Pacer, unhappy in Boston because he was kind of traded and then not. We talk about all that on Locked On NBA. Go check that out after you finish listening to me talk about the Pacers roster and rookie scale decisions. Let's talk rookie scale extensions. If you are curious, in every single extension that the Pacers can think about before the season starts, except for one, I have an episode on that for you. It was late May when this one came out. But it was about all the extensions that the Pacers can do this off season. There are several. Veteran side, Tice, McConnell, and Buddy Hield are all eligible. And then on the rookie side, at that time, which was late May, a reminder, it was Aaron Nesmith and Tyrese Halliburton. And then Tyrese Halliburton signed his. So now, obviously, that one is a little bit different. But Obi Toppin joined the team since then, and he is extension eligible. So there's a new one in the mix. And I just want to talk about the rookie scale guys, Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin. I don't need to get into too much of the mechanics because I did that on that past episode, but it can be up to 5 years in length and up to what Tyrese Halliburton got, $260 million. Obviously, neither of them are worth that much. But that is the maximum parameters. If it fits within that, great. So let's talk about this. And really what got this going in my head again is Dunked On. Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue and Dan Feldman this time did a podcast talking about all the rookie skill extensions that have not happened yet, but could happen this summer. They do mock rookie extensions. It's a great episode because they get into all the inner workings of what agents might be thinking, what players might be thinking, how the new CBA rules on this stuff really affects these players. And it was really, really good. And so it got me thinking about all this. And now with more info around the league, with other players having signed stuff, and with Obi Toppin on the Pacers, I wanted to revisit this conversation about these rookie extensions. Pacers have, again, about a month from now to decide on these. So I'll start by saying I don't think either one happens. I don't think either Nesmith or Obi Toppin sign a rookie skill extension with the Pacers because there's not enough clarity, right? They don't know if Obi Toppin, like all signs point to him being a great stylistic fit, and he's been a solid player, would given tons of opportunity. Until they know, right, they're kind of gambling. There's not enough clarity on if he's for sure going to be a guy that's worth investing in. And they have the crutch of restricted free agency next year to keep him anyway. So I don't have clarity to extend with him. With Nesmith, it's just role clarity. I think he's going to play. I think he should be in their rotation. He's a good defender. He's athletic. He can shoot well enough. That's a valuable piece. What is his role going to be? If McConnell's playing, he might not be playing at all. He might not even be in the rotation. There's just, I think he will be and should be, but there's ways you can toggle the Pacers rotation where he isn't. And all of this to say, there's just not enough clarity on either of these guys' long-term future for me to think that an extension is going to happen. That doesn't mean one won't, and there are good reasons to do it. We'll talk about that in a second. But I personally do not think either one happened. It's hard to imagine. Here's the biggest reason why. It's hard to imagine a value the Pacers would be happy with and the player would be happy with that isn't like insulting, right? So rookie extensions are really interesting because if you're a team, you're kind of thinking about getting a guy on a bargain deal because you know you can keep that player next year in restricted free agency. So you probably would offer like a fair market deal right now, what that player has produced so far in their career and nothing more, because you could bet on what the player could be and give them more than maybe what they're worth. But then if they don't get any better, you have a negative value contract, right? That does happen. John Collins, for example, like that happens sometimes. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. Keeping your players happy and paying guys is good, but it is risky there. The going over their value is risky and maybe unnecessary because you have restricted free agency as a backdrop to keep your guy and negotiate in the future. So a lot of times teams like to kind of bet right here, but players also like to bet on themselves. And if the offer is too low, they'll just say, screw that. I'll just wait a year and see what I can get. Sometimes that works great. Sometimes that works terrible. So it's really hard to find that middle ground where a player feels like they're being paid for their growth and a team feels like they're paying fair dollar for a player. It's hard to imagine with guys like this who have that uncertainty that there is a deal that kind of meets both of those criterias. So both of these guys seem like good bet on themselves candidates, right? Pacers could be the spot where they should land in the future, but if they have great years, they could be worth much more money to both the Pacers and themselves. So a key thing to remember is that these deals can be 5 years now, which changes the calculus of betting on yourself a little bit. But I'll be curious how this all shakes out. So something Dunked On talked about that I thought was really, really interesting was that the cap dynamics at play for these guys is very unique, right? The cap probably will go up a little bit next season. It could go up as much as 10%. But with the regional sports networks that broadcast the game declaring bankruptcy, Diamond Sports Group, that's like 20 teams use them for Bally, for example. There's some thought, and this has been shared by some league insiders and some cap dorks, that the cap could rise not as much next year because the league might not have as much revenue as previously projected. It'll probably still go up, but how much is in question. But the year after that, the new national TV deal kicks in for the NBA, and then the prevailing thought is that the cap will rise 10% every year for the remainder of the current CBA. So if you are a player like Obi Toppin or Aaron Nesmith, and the cap's going to go up a crazy amount in the next 4 years in total, then you might want to take a shorter deal, which is usually unusual for these young guys to take shorter deals because they want to be a free agent in their prime, right? 27, 28, whatever, so they can get their biggest contract possible. Shorter deals are fine, but they're also riskier. So the option of a shorter deal makes more sense for these guys, because if the cap goes up so much, all of a sudden, if they're the exact same player in 3 years, their services are just worth more by default, right, as a percentage of the cap. And so shorter deals might make more sense. On the flip side, the guarantee of being able to get 5 years of money is also new and is also appealing, right? Let's say they don't have the year or the career that they want. Well, hey, you have 5 years of money now. That's also fantastic. There's a lot of new dynamics that make this really interesting. And I think the lack of clarity makes this a no-go for either guy. I want to talk about what actually happened on Dunked On and what I think about it. So Obi Toppin was first up. They went chronologically through the picks in the first round. Obi Toppin went 8th. They compared his situation kind of to PJ Washington. They said PJ Washington just got 3 for 48 with Charlotte. He actually got 3 for 46.5 guaranteed with 1.5 million of unlikely bonuses, which I think is actually better, because that comparison was surprising to me. I think PJ Washington's better than Obi Toppin right now. Of course, he has an extra year of play, and a lot of people will disagree with that. I'm a big PJ Washington fan, though. That has less to do with Obi and more to do with my PJ Washington fandom as a player. So I thought that was interesting, and they settled on 3 for 48 for Obi with the Pacers. I thought that was interesting. I think that's a little high, but I don't know if Obi would take less than that for the reasons I just said, right? If you offer Obi Toppin 14 million, that's barely over the mid-level exception. A lot of teams could offer him about that next summer, and he could have a great year with the Pacers and be worth way more than 16 million. So for him, that's probably close to that sweet spot I described earlier, but too high for my blood. And I'm guessing, just given where the Pacers are at, probably too high for what they'd be willing to offer. But an interesting factor here, and something to watch if Toppin extension discussions do end up happening, is the 3-year number they came up with. Both because of what I just said, where that shorter number could make sense for these guys because of the rising cap, but also because that would line his contract up in years with Jarace Walker's, right? It would be this year. He's already under contract on his rookie deal, then the 3-year extension, then he'd be a free agent. And that would be right at the end of Jarace Walker's rookie scale deal. So if Jarace Walker proves he's way better when he's time to get paid, great. Obi Toppin comes off the books. You've got the wiggle room to do so. Everything makes sense. If Obi's still great, guess what? They're both free agents. Everything can still make sense. You can pay them for the role that they're in. So I actually liked that thinking. Lining up Toppin's deal with Walker's, if possible, if the Pacers are going to pursue an extension, does make a lot of sense. I think that value is about what it would take, but I don't think I would offer that if I were the Pacers. Not because I don't think Toppin can become or be a $16 million player. I think he can be, certainly, but because the lack of clarity with the Pacers is certainly hard for them. And they would be negotiating against themselves. Aaron Nesmith, they also came to an agreement on, which surprised me. 4 years, $36 million was the deal that they came up with, using Nasir Little as their comp. Nasir Little last summer, if you'll recall, signed a 4-year, $28 million rookie scale extension with the Portland Trailblazers. I usually think these ones that are below the mid-level exception just don't happen. It's very rare. Nasir Little was a rare exception. I think Nasir Little, they discussed this. Quincy Pondexter was one. I can't remember the other one. It's very rare that guys sign long, fully guaranteed deals for like less than the mid-level exception on these rookie skill extensions, because a lot of guys think they can get that from any team. They'll be young and potentially talented next summer. And if that's the case, if their team loses them for whatever reason, a lot of teams would want a young, talented player. And so they usually get 10 plus million. So it's rare for Nasir Little. And Nesmith is about that level of player, probably a little bit better, at least comparatively. And Nasir Little hadn't made as much. He was a 25th overall pick. Nesmith was a lottery guy. So I don't think Nesmith would take this. I think he would probably think, yeah, I can get, Doug McDermott money or something like that. And I don't know if he can, but I bet he thinks that at his age and his skill level. So that seemed, again, on the low side of what I would anticipate to me. But these guys cover the whole league. They know this stuff well. They know the perceptions well. They can compare it better. But 4 for 36, I would think Nesmith would think he could get more than that. I would offer that one if I was the Pacers. I would offer that if Nesmith took it. That's great. I think he's worth $9 million a year probably right now as a wing who can defend. But certainly, again, a lot of factors at play with how the Pacers sort out their wing rotation this coming season. If you can defend on the wing, I'm paying you. If Tony East is the GM, I am paying you. The Pacers have to think about what that would mean for their cap space. If they extend both of those guys at the numbers that Dunked On described, they would be running very low on cap space next year. That would add $25 million to their guaranteed salaries. Add in the stuff we talked about earlier with Mathurin and Jackson and Bruce Brown's team option, and all of a sudden their cap room is running a little dry. And that's another reason I don't think these extensions happen, is because the Pacers could be a big cap space player next year. I think that's going to matter for them in these discussions. Let's close out today's show with one more non-rookie skill contract thing and look at the Pacers training camp roster. What else can they still do in terms of signings this summer? They added another player recently. Who is it? What does that mean? And we'll look at all that to close out today's show. But before we do that, really quickly, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel. Snap into the action. The NFL is moving and grooving. We're 2 weeks in. You can get into it yourself on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, if you hop over there, new customers who get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed if they place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose on that $5 bet that you'll get from FanDuel. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than right now to get in on the action, because the app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season heading into week 3 on FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. And as always, gamble responsibly. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Kelly Oubre signed with the 76ers. Wow, a minimum. That is surprising to me. Locked On Sixers for the latest on a 20-point per game scorer on the wing, going for the minimum. I get why, but that was still kind of jarring to see actually written down. Let's close out today's show with a slightly newsy item. So these always make my ears perk up, more so than most people's. The Mad Ants made a trade, and this matters a lot for the Pacers training camp roster. The Mad Ants acquired Craig Sword in a trade. They sent their first-round pick in the 2024 G League draft to the Capital City Go-Go for Craig Sword. So usually these G League trades in the summer make my eyebrows raise and go, because a lot of times this happens so that the Pacers and the Mad Ants now have Craig Sword's rights. Well, the Pacers don't, but the Mad Ants have Craig Sword's G League rights. So now, if Craig Sword were to sign with the Pacers and then get cut in camp and then go to the G League, the team he would report to is the Pacers G League team. And that's relevant because if he signs an Exhibit 10 contract that gives him a bonus for playing for a team's G League affiliate, he would have to be on that team. So this happens a lot. This happened last summer. The Pacers traded with the Memphis Hustle to get David Stockton and then signed him to an Exhibit 10 contract. They did the same thing with Norvell Pell and the Canton Charge. They do it every summer. They trade for guys G League rights that they're going to give Exhibit 10s to. Well, I can report this, and I have a little story up on it. They're going to do it for Craig Sword. Craig Sword is going to get an Exhibit 10 with the Pacers, and that is part of why the Mad Ants traded for him. He's played the NBA before 3 games with the Wizards. He's 29. He's an off-ball guard, and he is going to sign an Exhibit 10 with the Pacers. So is Darius McGee, who was on this podcast last week. If you want to listen to that, he played for the Pacers in Summer League and is going to sign an Exhibit 10 with the team. And that's 2. So the Pacers roster is at 18. They have 15 players on guaranteed contracts and 3 guys on 2-way deals. You can now, under the new CBA, carry 21 players into training camp. So if you count Sword and McGee, that'd give the Pacers 20, meaning they had 1 more roster spot. But not so fast, I say. Usually it used to be very cut and dry, pretty easy. 3 Exhibit 10 guys come into camp. They get cut. They go to the G League. Now there's way more. Last year, the Pacers, if you'll recall, they signed Stockton, Pell, and Justin Anderson to Exhibit 10 deals and then cut them all the next day. And then they signed a couple other guys who I can't remember right away to Exhibit 10 deals, Gabe York being one of them. I wish I could remember all of them. And then they cut them right away. And then they signed David Das Servitas to an Exhibit 10 deal. He was actually in camp. I might have the chronological order of all that wrong, but that's close to right. Servitas was in camp. So a lot of guys that had Exhibit 10s didn't actually play in training camp. And then on the very last day of camp, after they cut Servitas, Tevin Brown, Jermaine Samuels, and Eli Brooks signed their Exhibit 10s. They didn't actually practice for the Pacers. They just came in for that day, got some shots up, and they got waived. So just because it has been reported by me or someone else that someone is signing an Exhibit 10 deal does not mean they're going to play in training camp for the Pacers. Keep that in mind because you could hear that in the next couple of weeks. That may not be accurate. But either way, the only 2 players we know right now are signing Exhibit 10s with the Pacers this offseason are Craig Sword and Darius McGee. When they sign it, will they be in camp? We don't know that yet. But if you look at the Pacers kind of depth chart and kind of break down their team, right, it seems like if their third unit in camp would be something like whatever, McConnell and Shepard would be in there. Maybe Kendall Brown's in there, but probably Jordan Wara's in there, Daniel Tice, and whatever big doesn't play at the 4. And then their 4th unit of Isaiah Wong, Kendall Brown, Oscar Tshiebwe, it seems like if they're going to scrimmage naturally, like a 2 guard and a 4 would make some sense. Sword could be that 2 guard. Who knows what else they could do. That is just me thinking about what camp could look like, but it could be a lot different than I just described. And I don't know how the Pacers consider those transactions. It could just be the best players for their G League team. I was just looking at it from a training camp perspective, but Sword and McGee, the only ones known for the Pacers. If any more come in, we'll of course talk about them all here on the Locked On Pacers podcast, because those guys could, in theory, compete for a 2-way deal and are, of course, names to keep an eye on throughout the G League season. York, 2 years in a row, signed an Exhibit 10 and then got a call up with the Pacers during the season. So that's the Pacers roster update. Still technically at 18 guys. They haven't signed anyone to an Exhibit 10, despite the 2 reported names that they're going to at some point. Thank you guys for listening today. I really enjoyed this show and diving into more contractual stuff. I think I've covered every contractual thing this offseason already, but now I could get into more of the options and Toppin stuff. Tomorrow, back with Caitlin, talking small forwards. I almost said shooting guard. Small forwards, Bruce Brown, Aaron Nesmith, and Jordan Wara's season preview coming up. Next week, we'll finish up with point guards. And our last episode this week confirmed, I'll be talking with Dan Favale of Bleacher Report, one of my favorite people who covers the NBA, about the top 100 lists that are coming out, ranking all the players in the NBA and the Pacers spots on those lists and who could climb onto them. Really fun stuff coming. And the next week, it's the final week before camp. Lots of stuff will be coming. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys a ton for listening today. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.